Good evening, ladies and gentlemen around the world. This is the Militia Roundtable. Our website is militiaradio.com. Our guest tonight, I want to welcome him back. It's Clif from halfpasthuman.com, founder of the Webbot project. I'll yield the floor to Bruce here, and he can take it away from there.
Thanks, Steve, and I'd like to thank Clif for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us again tonight. And I'm just going to give a pre-warning to everybody. What we're about to discuss tonight is pretty heavy topics, so please remember that this is predictive, that it's not for sure going to happen, so don't everybody freak out. And with that, Clif, why don't you fill everybody in on how your little project works, and we'll go from there.
And no worries. We have to acknowledge right off that we make forecasts, not really predictions, but forecasts, which are the extrapolation of trends. We're pretty good, but our accuracy is probably twice what chance would allow, but that still means we're wrong half the time. So indeed, the admonition to just take it and sort of chill out over it is well taken. When we're right, we're usually spectacularly right, but then we'll miss a lot of stuff. So basically what we do is we send software agents to read through stuff on the internet, and we aggregate millions upon millions of words together and look at them from an archetypical point of view, as though examining language very much like an archaeologist would examine ruins, trying to figure out what people had been thinking at the time that they created it, and this sort of thing. In our particular endeavor, what we do is we assign emotional values to words, and we watch the emotional values cluster as language changes over time. And it's an interesting world we live in, because language is not static. And if you just sit back and sort of think about it, there's no real reason that it shouldn't be static. I mean, other than the growth of words to accommodate new technologies, there's no real reason for people to use a different set of words to discuss common, everyday kind of happenstance, except it would be really boring. So apparently Universe wants us to be a little bit more entertaining and prompts us to alter the choice of words we make about ordinary conversations, gardening, pie, doing laundry, whatever, fixing the cars, going fishing. And so we come up with new words and tell our stories in different ways. And when we read this kind of stuff over the internet, we watch those shifts, and we'll see shifts around particular subjects, and then off we go. Sort of makes sense.
Yeah. And it's a real good sense. So then what you did last time you were up there, you went through all this and you put out a report that was called The Shape of Things to Come, and then we had you up, and everybody loved your coming up, and I do appreciate you coming back. And
sure, no problem at all, yeah.
You have your latest report of The Shape of Things to Come, and I believe you even changed your intro with a warning right off the bat. You want to let everybody know what your warning was?
Yeah, our warning is that this is pretty grim material, because it's a forecast based on existing trends, which I think a lot of people would acknowledge they don't look too good in the present. And so projecting such trends out into the future in language has given us a grim view of the potentials that lie ahead of us over these next couple of years. It's adult-only kind of material. Unfortunately, that really is not true, because it does children a disservice to prolong their childhood by trying to hide reality from them. And we've got some serious impact coming from reality over this next 18 months to, say, 3 years. And as a sovereign, aware individual, I would think anybody over 10 or who was emotionally capable of starting to deal with it shouldn't necessarily be shielded from everything that's going on. Everyone would have to make their own decisions, but even kids in the previous depression were aware that things weren't normal.
Oh, I agree. And, shielding them and saying everything's all right isn't really going to help them, because everybody's going to have to come together to survive what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, there's no question about it. In our work, we don't really rely 100% on the predictive nature of the language, although that starts us off. But we will also rely on juxtaposing that against actual developing trends in resource analysis. The resource analysis is relatively easily done these days. Actually, we use much of the same software for going and checking on facts. We'll have a list, for instance, of all of the government sites relating to agriculture around the planet, and then we just send a spider to go and read all those sites overnight and extract the certain levels of language, and it boils it down for us to a thick syrupy mass. And so we can get a view of what the government is allowing to be said about their agriculture, and then you can cross-compare that against actual trend reports coming from various different field sampling services that are posted or published, and you see basically a level of discrepancy, or what we call the lie delta. How large is the difference between what government is saying or allowing to be said and the reality as we can sniff it out? And then we'll juxtapose that against predictions within our linguistics for crop failures, for instance. And sure enough, the language has been predicting for a number of years a significant impact on the planetary food body for all humans. And by that we mean all sources of protein, carbohydrates, etc., reduced down to their natural state, not manufactured, but rather the raw ingredients upon which every food is dependent. And so those crop forecasts that we had for major downturn are in fact turning out. And it can be ascertained by just looking at what the government is even saying, let alone the field sampling services. So at a bare minimum, the planet is facing some really harsh decisions here, whether we do it through dollar rationing in the sense of rising prices on food or some other more humane level of approaching it. We're going to have a rising population, adding 250,000 people a year, or a day on the planet, and a crashing grain crops in the 5 most productive grains we've got, in the midst of course, weather changes and everything that we've all experienced. So under the circumstances, it doesn't bode well, and we need to start thinking about those particular impacts on our lives. They're going to get here fairly rapidly. We live in by the way, many people are not aware of it, I think, but since the transformation of the Japanese industrial machine in the 60s by Peter Drucker and other people in his manufacturing engineering specialties, we've been gradually going towards a planetary level of a just-in-time delivery system where warehouses pretty much go by the way because we've got computers and scheduling down to where we can sort of warehouse on wheels. Unfortunately, it means that there is no stores anymore. There's no large warehouses or storage facilities for vast quantities of grains, etc. They're all in the process of being processed or are being offered for sale somewhere in retail format. So under the circumstances, a single series of bad years can be catastrophic because we don't have that proverbial 7 years stored grain. And this I find the most troubling. The economic crash and some of the other issues that we're going to face are going to certainly exacerbate everything, but there's still enough in the way of available resources for all of us if we were to set about it in a quasi-rational way and say, okay, this is how we have to divide things up. But we make terrible decisions, so I don't think it bodes very well for the social order.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm going to jump a little on you because after reading your report, the one that really jumped out on me was the powers that be that were going to come up and say 15% of the population's got alien DNA and all these people are going to be special. You want to explain a little more into that?
Yeah, let's hop into our Wayback Machine and go back into the late 60s and the rise of the anti-war or peace movement in the U.S. At that time, it became known that our local-grown peace movements were, in fact, being infiltrated, and they were infiltrated by our own government with the idea of being disruptive. They did all kinds of interesting social engineering tricks on these various groups to try and derail everything and keep their little war going the way they wanted it. That it didn't work was an interesting intersection of a lot of forces that occurred at that time. Now we come back to the present time and we find that the powers that be are inculcating into what we're going to have to call the truth movement, or the new anti-establishment movement, however we want to define this group of people that just don't buy into the propagandistic media and government anymore. They're directly under assault. The way in which the powers that be are starting to do this assault